you know, in the previous video, you talked a little bit about Elmer and you talked a little bit about Robert. Can you talk about Benny?
Well, Benny was, well, as boys, as a family, we kind of paired off when we were younger. Like Elmer and Robert being, they got to do things, and you had me and Benny, and we paired off pretty much. And then Kenneth came along 5 years later after me, well, 3 years after Benny. And you know, he was kind of thrown out of the way. He's just kind of in the way. You know, that's probably in the way. He had some heart problems too, so that made things even worse. He was spoiled a lot, which I'll get into later. Then of course Danny 13 years, almost 13 years after me, came along Danny. When I was sent away from home, I had yellow jaundice, and I couldn't be there for the early childhood. You know, the very first few weeks of his birth. So anyhow, the other way of pairing we did was the oldest, every other one. There's me and Elma and Robert and Denny and when you come to fighting, that's what you got. You know, you get these split pairs, and so and of course Kenny is always the one, the antagonist, the one that caused all the problems and not disciplined and I'll get into that further later, but why this has all occurred. But if I didn't tolerate Kenny's mischief, and so I'd be the first one to make the line of attack, you know, and then come his defender, Robert, and me and Robert used to get into it. Then the whole pull-out pile would be in a mess, you know. But I was usually the one that got the switch. I had to go get on the switch. So I usually made 5 or 6 visits a day to Mother for the executioner, you know. And but we were very, very close. We'd tell you about the fighting, but man, that was we weren't allowed. We did not hit each other in the face, nor below the belt. That's 2 things you did not do ever. You did get away from different men if you did that. From the rest of the big boys, you know. We stayed together. We had loads of childhood friends. I say loads, about 16 childhood friends. Just more like a family ourselves, you know. The pack I mentioned earlier. We were the inside pack, you know, the Sims Chapel tribe, you know, bunch of wild Indians. But did a little bit of everything, challenge nature. But all I can say, we loved each other very much, and when we loved, Elmer was the first one out of the family to move, and he joined the Air Force. And like I say, he didn't like school, but he loved learning. And I think his first attempt was going to join he and Ray Johnston, one of our buddies, neighbors. Went down to join the Navy and some other guys. But anyhow, Elmer didn't get in neatly, so he went on down, going to join the service anyhow. So he joined the Air Force. But before this happened, Elmer was a great, you know, a very, very fine baseball pitcher. And I happened to be the catcher. That's why my thumb's no good today, you know. Catch his balls, you know. That is baseball. I hope you get that. But he's should throw a mean curveball drop. Well, actually, he throw about every pitch there is in baseball. Elmer was he always tried to tell us what to do. You know, tried to be the older brother that he was. But he also liked the radio. He liked his radio programming. Like Long Ranger and this sort of thing, Amos and Andy, and the day of the radio, when we got the first radio in 1939, you know, 1949, excuse me, when we got electricity for the first time, man, that was a day of hallelujah, you know. So I don't care where we were, you know, out 100 yards away, hear that radio and that music, good music coming on though, and we'd run to that radio, you know. beat up thing, but we had to go back to the back and tune it, you know, and change the stations. No, it didn't work, but we knew how to work it. But Elma, very, very much a scholar, believe it or not. But he went on to be a fireman in the Air Force, working along out, you know, TDY. That's away from the major group, you know, living rented rentals. He and a couple of other fellows from the Air Force, and they worked through the desert, you know, desert country, and we had the West really well.
Yep.
Then he spent 3 years in Germany. After that, he had an accident where he's hung by a ring, got caught on one of the fire truck doors, and he hit his head, and the door hit him on the head. And he had problems that all his life. But he worked in, he was administrative type work. You know, he did at payroll, and as far as the Air Force. And later on, he joined the Army and did postal work. You know, and Elma, even though he didn't finish high school at home, he got his GED. He went to college with me. He started the same year that I did, and we had a little quarrel there, and I accidentally hit him in his chin and broke his jaw. He couldn't talk, so he dropped out of college. And I've been forever felt guilty about that ever since. But he went on to build golf courses. Followed Dan Dawkins and married one of my second cousins, and they traveled out to the Midwest building miniature golf courses. And later on while he's out there, he joined the Army and came back and then worked around Alabama after that. He went away several times. That's what always came back. Robert was a different kind of guy, just a loyal family person. A great looking guy, about 6'4", and slim, muscular, but slim, long arms, longer than mine. I know because I found that out in fights, and I figured out how to put it down too. Because I would go for his legs. I got him then, but I was quite a bit shorter than him, quite a bit. And anyhow, Robert was quiet. He enjoyed people. He enjoyed good singing. Actually, he had an operatic voice. You know, when I say that, I mean he got this true tone quality. And he'd mock these opera singers, and to a T, good. And he liked Dean Martin, these folks too. You know, he could sound like that bunch, you know. But trying to play publicly, you know, he never did. But around the house, he was a stalwart. I mean, he really was. He was about sweeping the yard. No one had to ask him to do anything. He got to doing it, you know. Of course, sometimes we'd pair off before Air Force. You know, I said that Air Force being Elma. Before they got split up as a pair, you know. But after Elma was going, then Robert and I kind of paired up. You know, we were always like twins, you know. But Robert was quick. He's slow to talk. But you didn't make him angry. Because next thing you know, you're on the ground. That's the way he didn't. He's careful about his brothers. We'd stay in fights all the time, but it was nothing really serious. We'd always stop. One of the other brothers would stop us, you know. But Robert did like females. He did like them. But he was unusual in the fact, well, Emma was too, that actually sent money home. I mentioned this earlier. Robert, I mean, he wound up loading ships in Korea. And he's in transportation. And later on, I had forgotten all about this until just recently. He was selected after he got back from Korea to go to represent the United States, you know, in demonstrations of heavy equipment in Paris, France. for NATO and then to Germany. So he traveled much around more than I did.